They say concrete doesn't lie, only people do. I spent 40 years listening to skyscrapers crack before they fell, but I missed the sound of my son's soul shattering. At 8:05 p.m., I found him on his knees at the Vanguard gala, scrubbing wine off his mother-in-law's shoes while she laughed. They think I am just a harmless retiree, big mistake. I am about to tear their foundation down literally. My name is James Johnson. I am 64 years old, and for the better part of 4 decades, I was a senior structural integrity inspector for the state of Texas. I know how things stand up and, more importantly, I know exactly how they fall down. When you spend your life looking for stress fractures in concrete and fatigue in steel beams, you start to see the world differently. You stop looking at the paint and the facade. You look at the load-bearing walls. You look for the rot hidden behind the drywall. Tonight, I was looking at the Zenith. It was the newest jewel in the crown of Vanguard Holdings, a 50-story monstrosity of glass and steel that pierced the San Antonio skyline like a jagged needle. It was designed to look futuristic, but to my eyes, it just looked arrogant. I pulled my 1998 Ford F-150 into the underground parking structure. The engine rattled with a familiar cough, a sound that usually comforted me, but tonight, it felt out of place among the silent electric sedans and 6-figure sports cars. My truck was covered in a layer of limestone dust that never really washed off. It sat there between a silver Mercedes and a black Tesla, like a rough stone in a jewelry box. I was not there to inspect the building. I was retired. My badge was in a drawer at home next to my wife Maria's urn. I was there as a father. My son Leo had called me earlier in the day, sounding frantic because he had lost the spare key to his apartment. He was staying late at the office again. He told me he had been promoted to project manager last month. He told me things were going great. He told me he was finally earning the respect of the Vance family. I grabbed the key from the dashboard and stepped out. The air in the garage was recycled and stale. I smoothed down my flannel shirt. It was clean, but it was old. My jeans were stiff with starch, but frayed at the hems. I walked toward the elevators with the heavy gait of a man who has carried tool belts for too many years. The security desk was a slab of polished black granite that cost more than my first house. The guard behind it was young, with a neck too thick for his collar. He looked up at me, and his eyes did a quick inventory. Boots, jeans, flannel, calloused hands. He did not see a person. He saw a delivery driver or a janitor who had lost his way. "Deliveries are in the loading dock around the back," he said, without looking me in the eye. He went back to scrolling on his tablet. "I am here to see Leo Johnson," I said. My voice was low. It is a voice that has had to cut over the sound of jackhammers and pile drivers. "He is the project manager," the guard snorted. It was a dismissive, wet sound. "Mr. Johnson is at the executive gala on the 42nd floor. It is a private event. Black tie only. I do not think you are on the list unless you are here to fix a toilet." I felt the heat rise in my neck, but I clamped it down. This is what concrete does. It takes the pressure, and it holds. "Fine," I said. "I will call him." I walked away, but I did not leave. I knew buildings like this. I knew their anatomy. Architects like to hide the working organs of a skyscraper, so the rich tenants never have to see how the sausage is made. I walked past the bank of high-speed elevators to the far wall near the fire exit. There was a service panel there painted to blend in with the wall. I knew the standard keypad code for maintenance access in this district. It was usually the year the building code was last updated. I punched in 2018. The light blinked green. The freight elevator smelled of industrial cleaner and rubber. It rattled as it climbed. I watched the numbers tick up. Level 10, level 20, level 30. I was bringing my son a key, but really, I was looking for reassurance. Leo had been different lately, thinner, quieter. When he married Sarah Vance 3 years ago, I told him he was marrying into a shark tank. Victoria Vance, the CEO of Vanguard, was a woman who smiled with her teeth bared. Leo had laughed it off. He said he could handle it. He said he wanted to build affordable housing, And Vanguard had the resources. The elevator dinged at the 42nd floor. The doors slid open and the noise hit me first. It was the roar of a party. Crystal clinking against crystal. A string quartet playing something that sounded expensive and boring. The hum of 100 conversations that meant absolutely nothing. I stepped out into a service corridor. The walls here were unfinished drywall. This was the back of the house. I moved silently. My work boots were heavy, but I knew how to distribute my weight. I followed the sound of the party until I reached a heavy oak door that led to the guest area. I cracked it open just an inch. The ballroom was blinding. Chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling. Men in tuxedos, and women in gowns that cost a year of my pension, stood in clusters, holding flutes of champagne. I scanned the room for Leo. I looked for his height. I looked for his broad shoulders that he got from my side of the family. I did not see him. Then I heard laughter. It was not the polite cocktail party laughter of the ballroom. It was sharp and cruel. It was the sound of wolves cornering a deer. It was coming from the hallway to my left, near the executive restrooms. I let the service door close and moved down the adjacent hallway. The carpet here was thick enough to swallow my footsteps. The laughter grew louder. I recognized one of the voices. It was high and shrill, and it grated on my nerves like metal on metal. Victoria Vance. "Look at him," a male voice said. Pathetic. I reached the corner and stopped. The door to the men's lounge was propped open with a heavy brass doorstop. I peered through the gap. My breath caught in my throat. It felt like a physical blow to the chest. The lounge was pure opulence, gold fixtures, Italian marble from floor to ceiling. But right in the center of that luxury was my son. Leo was wearing a tuxedo, but the jacket was thrown on the floor in a heap. His white dress shirt was soaked with sweat and sticking to his back. He was on his hands and knees. He was not inspecting the floor. He was not picking something up. He was scrubbing it. He held a rough bristle brush in his right hand. His left hand was bare and red, rubbing against the cold stone. There was a dark stain on the white marble near the shoe of a woman standing over him. Red wine. Victoria Vance stood there looking down at him like he was a cockroach she had just decided not to step on yet, because she was enjoying the view. She held a fresh glass of wine in one hand. Flanking her were two men I did not recognize, but they wore suits that screamed private equity. They were smirking. "You missed a spot there," Victoria said. She pointed the toe of her diamond-encrusted heel at a faint smear of crimson on the floor. "Put some back into it, Leo. God knows you do not use your brain for anything, so you might as well use your muscle." Leo stopped scrubbing for a second. His shoulders were shaking. I watched his hand grip the brush so hard, his knuckles turned white. "Victoria, please," Leo whispered. His voice was cracked. "The guests will see." "Let them see," Victoria laughed. The sound echoed off the hard surfaces. "Let them see exactly what you are worth. You think because you have a degree you are special. You are a leech, Leo, a parasite. You live in my house. You drive the car I leased. You work in my building. The least you can do is clean up my mess when I spill my drink." One of the men chuckled. "He holds that brush like a natural, Victoria. Maybe you should transfer him to custodial. Might save you a salary." "I have thought about it," Victoria said. She took a sip of her wine. "But then, who would Sarah have to kick around when she gets bored? Clean it, Leo. Clean it before I lose my patience and have security throw you out into the street." "Do you want to be on the street, Leo? Do you want to go back to that little shack your father lives in?" I felt a heat in my chest that was hotter than any fire. It was a cold, absolute rage. My hand went to the door handle. I was going to walk in there. I was going to break that man's jaw. I was going to take that brush and shove it down Victoria's throat. I was going to grab my son and drag him out of this hellhole. I took a step forward. My boot scraped against the floor. Inside the room, Leo froze. He looked up. For a second, I thought he saw me. but he was looking at his own reflection in the polished black marble of the vanity. His face was a mask of absolute misery. His eyes were red and swollen. He looked broken. He looked like a building whose structural integrity had been compromised beyond repair. But then, he did something that stopped me dead in my tracks. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He did not call the police. He did not call me. He did not call his wife. He stared at the screen. I saw his face change. It was not just shame anymore. It was terror. Pure, unadulterated fear. His eyes widened and his breathing became shallow. He looked at the screen like it was a bomb timer ticking down to 0. "I am hurrying," Leo stammered. He shoved the phone back into his pocket with trembling hands. "I am cleaning it, Victoria. Please, just do not do it." "Do not do what?" Victoria asked innocently, playing to her audience. "Send you home, fire you, oh Leo, you are so dramatic. Just scrub." Leo bent down. He put both hands on the brush and scrubbed harder. The sound of the bristles on the stone was a harsh, rhythmic rasping. Scrub, scrub, scrub. I stood in the shadows paralyzed. This was not bullying. I had seen bullying. I had worked on construction sites since I was 18. I knew what hazing looked like. This was different. The look on Leo's face when he checked that phone was the look of a man with a gun to his head. Victoria was not just being cruel. She was holding something over him. Something heavy enough to make a grown man, a valedictorian, an architect, kneel in his own sweat and clean a floor while people laughed at him. If I walked in there now, I would be reacting with my heart and not my head. If I punched that man or screamed at Victoria, I might trigger whatever trap Leo was so afraid of. I was a structural inspector. You do not run into a collapsing building and start kicking the walls. You assess the damage. You find the load-bearing stress points. You figure out what is holding the disaster together, and then you carefully dismantle it piece by piece. I forced my hand to release the door handle. My fingers were stiff. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my mind was turning into ice. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my own phone. It was an old model with a cracked screen, but the camera still worked. Through the crack in the door, I zoomed in. I framed the shot. Leo on his knees, the humiliation in his posture. Victoria, standing over him, laughing, her face twisted in ugly delight. The two men smirking. The wine stain. I took the picture. The shutter sound was silent. I checked the image. It was grainy but clear enough. It was evidence. Not of a crime perhaps, but of a sin. I put the phone away. I took one last look at my son. He was wiping the floor with his own silk handkerchief now, trying to dry it. He looked small. He looked defeated. "Hold on, son," I thought. "Just hold on. The cavalry is not coming. The demolition crew is." I turned around. I did not run. I walked back down the hallway with silent, steady steps. I went back through the service door, back into the freight elevator. As the elevator descended, taking me away from the music and the laughter and the sound of my son scrubbing a floor, I felt a change inside me. The James Johnson who had driven here, the tired widower, looking to drop off a key, was gone. He had been left on the 42nd floor. The man riding the elevator down was someone else. I was the man who knew that every structure, no matter how tall or how expensive, has a breaking point. You just have to know where to place the charges. I walked out of the elevator and through the garage. I walked past the Mercedes and the Tesla. I climbed into my dusty Ford. I placed the spare key on the passenger seat. He would not need it tonight. I started the engine. It roared to life. I drove out of the garage and into the night, leaving the zenith shining behind me like a golden tombstone. I did not look back in the rearview mirror. I did not need to see it again. I knew exactly what I had to do. They thought they were gods in a tower. They thought they were untouchable. But they had forgotten the most basic rule of construction. The higher you build, the harder you fall. and I was going to be the gravity. The drive home was a blur of highway lights and simmering rage. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight, the leather cover creaked in protest. The image of my son on his knees was burned into my retinas, overlaid against the passing street lamps, like a ghost image. To keep myself from turning the truck around and driving it straight through the front doors of the Zenith, I forced my mind to travel back in time. I needed to remember who Leo was before they broke him. I went back 7 years. It was a humid May afternoon in Austin. The sun was beating down on the University of Texas campus, baking the asphalt until it smelled like tar and ambition. I sat in the bleachers, sweating in my only good suit, watching a sea of burnt orange gowns ripple in the heat. When they called his name, Leo James Johnson, summa cum laude, the roar in my ears drowned out the applause. I watched him walk across that stage. He did not strut. He did not preen. He walked with a quiet, steady confidence. He shook the dean's hand and looked up into the stands until he found me. He raised his diploma just an inch, a private salute between us. Later that day, over burgers and cheap beer at a roadside joint, he laid out his plans. He had a notebook filled with sketches. They were not skyscrapers or casinos. They were modular housing units, storm-resistant, energy-efficient, affordable. "Shelter is a human right, Dad," he had said, his eyes bright with that specific kind of idealism only the young and untouched possess. "You spent your life inspecting buildings to make sure they were safe. I want to build them that way from the first brick. I want to make sure no kid has to sleep in a car because their house got blown away." He was so pure then. He was iron that had not yet been put in the fire. He was strong, but he was brittle. He did not know that the world does not run on good intentions, it runs on leverage and liability. Then came Sarah Vance. I remember the wedding. It was held at the Vance estate, a sprawling compound that looked more like a feudal castle than a home. I stood in the back, wearing a rented tuxedo that smelled faintly of mothballs, watching my son marry into American royalty. Sarah was beautiful in that polished, expensive way that money buys, but her eyes were vacant. She looked at Leo not with love, but with the satisfaction of a collector acquiring a rare artifact. The Vances paraded him around like a prize poodle. "Look at our son-in-law, the brilliant architect. Look how charitable we are welcoming the common folk." I felt a knot in my stomach that day. It was the same instinct I got when I walked onto a job site, where the foreman was cutting corners on safety gear. I ignored it. I told myself I was just a jealous old man who did not want to lose his son. I told myself they could give him the resources to build his dream projects. I was wrong. They did not want his dreams. They wanted his signature. I pulled my truck into the driveway of my house. It sat on a quiet cul-de-sac in a working-class neighborhood. I built it myself 30 years ago. It is not pretty. The siding is a dull gray, and the lawn is more crabgrass than turf. But the foundation is 18-inch reinforced concrete, with number 5 rebar laid on 12-inch centers. You could park a tank on my living room floor, and the tiles would not crack. It was built to last, not to impress. I unlocked the front door, and the silence of the house greeted me. It used to be lonely since Maria passed, but tonight, the silence felt like focus. I walked straight through the kitchen, ignoring the empty coffee pot, and went into the garage. This was my sanctuary. My wife used to call it the bunker. I called it the war room. One wall was lined with metal filing cabinets, containing 40 years of inspection reports. The other was dominated by a drafting table and a high-powered computer setup I used for consulting work before I fully retired. The air smelled of ozone, old paper, and machine oil. I sat down in my ergonomic chair and woke the computer. The screens hummed to life, bathing the dark garage in a cool blue glow. I cracked my knuckles. It was time to go to work. I did not have official access to the Vanguard internal servers, obviously. But the construction industry is a small world, and the digital infrastructure that supports it is surprisingly interconnected. I pulled up the login portal for the National Construction Data System. It is a federal database where all major commercial projects are required to upload their material certifications and structural compliance logs for insurance purposes. My official credentials had expired 6 months ago. However, the system administrator was a man named Gary, who I had saved from a negligence lawsuit back in '99 by proving a crane collapse was mechanical failure, not operator error. Gary had forgotten to deactivate my backdoor administrative access. It was a professional courtesy. I typed in the username hammer_J and the password, which was a string of numbers representing the tensile strength of titanium. Access granted. I navigated to the search bar and typed in the Zenith. The file was massive. Gigabytes of data poured onto my screen. Blueprints, CAD drawings, soil analysis reports, wind load simulations. I skipped the pretty 3D renders meant for the public and went straight to the Material Procurement and Verification subdirectory. This is where the bodies are buried. In construction, you can fake a facade, but you cannot fake the weight of steel. I started opening the bill of lading documents for the past 18 months. I was looking for the structural skeleton of the building. The Zenith was a 50-story tower. In a wind zone like San Antonio, the core columns needed to be high-strength concrete, at least 8,000 psi reinforced with grade 60 steel. I opened the first document. It was a receipt for 300 tons of rebar delivered on February 12th. And there it was. At the bottom of the document, in the box marked Accepting Officer, was a digital signature. Leo J. Johnson, Project Manager. I frowned. That was odd. Usually the site superintendent or the quality control officer signs for raw materials. The project manager handles the budget and the schedule, not the gritty details of delivery. I opened the next one. Concrete pouring log, March 3rd. Leo J. Johnson. I opened another. HVAC ductwork inspection. Leo J. Johnson. I opened 50 documents. Every single one of them, from the structural steel to the fireproofing spray, bore my son's signature. They had made him sign for everything. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. In the legal world of construction, the person who signs the acceptance log is the person who certifies that the material meets the design specifications. If the material fails, the person who signed for it is liable. Not the CEO, not the owner, the signer. They were building a paper trail, and it led straight to Leo. But why, if the building was built to code liability, would not matter? You only set up a fall guy if you know there is going to be a fall. I opened the structural analysis folder. I pulled up the as-built specifications for the main load-bearing columns on floors 1 through 10. These are the legs of the giant. If they wobble, the whole thing comes down. The original design called for number 11 rebar bundles bars as thick as your wrist, spaced 4 inches apart inside the concrete columns. This creates a cage of steel so dense that the concrete just fills the gaps. It provides the flexibility needed to sway in the wind without snapping. Then, I pulled up the actual material usage logs that Leo had signed. I did the mental math converting tonnage to linear feet. I ran the numbers twice. Then, I grabbed a calculator and ran them a third time. My heart hammered against my ribs. The tonnage was 30% light. They were not using number 11 bars on 4-inch centers. Based on the weight of steel delivered, they were likely using number 9 bars, or spacing the number 11s at 8 inches. To the naked eye, once the concrete is poured, the column looks exactly the same. It is a gray pillar. But structurally, they had built a 50-story tower on legs made of glass. I cross-referenced the concrete supplier. The design specified a custom aggregate mix with a crush strength of 10,000 psi for the lower levels. The delivery logs showed standard commercial mix type C. That is 5,000 psi at best. I sat back in my chair, the breath hissing out of my lungs. This was not just negligence. This was criminal. They had saved maybe $10 million on materials pocket change for a project this size, but they had reduced the building's lateral load capacity by half. If a severe storm hit San Antonio, or if the foundation settled unevenly by even an inch, the zenith would not just crack. It would shear. It would collapse. And when the forensic engineers came to sift through the rubble, they would pull up these documents. They would see that the materials delivered did not match the design. And they would see who signed for them. Leo J. Johnson. Victoria Vance was not just bullying him. She was holding a prison sentence over his head. She had probably forced him to sign these, claiming it was just paperwork, or maybe she forged his digital key. But now, if he tried to quit, or if he tried to speak up, she would reveal the fraud he had supposedly committed. She would claim he embezzled the difference in material costs. She would say he swapped the high-grade steel for cheap scrap and pocketed the cash. That was why he was scrubbing the floor. That was why he looked terrified when he checked his phone. He was not just protecting his job. He was protecting his freedom. He was a hostage in a tuxedo. I felt a surge of nausea followed immediately by a clarity so sharp it cut. I needed proof. The digital logs were strong, but they could be altered. I needed to know where that steel actually came from. If I could prove the steel was substandard before it even arrived on site, I could prove the conspiracy started at the top, not with the project manager. I grabbed my secure burner phone from the bottom drawer. I dialed a number I had not called in 5 years. It rang 4 times. Then a voice like gravel in a cement mixer answered. "This line is for emergencies only, Hammer. Are you dying?" "Hello, Mike," I said. "I am not dying, but a building is about to." Iron Mike. Kowalski was a gray market contractor who operated out of a salvage yard in Houston. He knew every shady supplier, every cut-rate quarry, and every bribe-taking inspector in the tri-state area. He did not break the law exactly, but he walked so close to the line, he had chalk on his shoes. "I need you to trace a shipment," I said. 300 tons of rebar delivered to the Vanguard Zenith project on February 12th of last year. The manifest says it came from Lone Star Steel, but the density counts are wrong. I think it is re-rolled scrap. Mike whistled low. Vanguard. That is Victoria Vance's outfit. You are playing with fire, Jimmy. That woman eats contractors for breakfast and spits out lawsuits. She is trying to eat my son, I said. My voice was flat and hard. I need to know who really melted that steel, Mike. I need to know if it came from one of those ghost foundries across the border that melts down old car chassis and calls it structural grade. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear the background noise of Mike's yard, the screech of a crane, the clang of metal. If I dig into this, Mike said slowly, and I find what you think I will find, it is going to get ugly. People disappear over this kind of money. I am not asking you to testify, I said. Just get me the origin. Get me the real shipping labels. I will handle the rest. It will cost you, Mike said. Information like that is not free. I have the cash, I said. Just get it done, tonight. Give me 2 hours, Mike said. And James, watch your back. If the foundation is rotten, the rats are usually big. The line went dead. I put the phone down and looked at the glowing screen. I looked at my son's signature repeated over and over again, like a digital confession he never meant to make. Do not worry, Leo, I whispered to the empty garage. They handed you a faulty blueprint, but your old man is about to conduct a surprise inspection. I reached for the coffee pot, remembered it was empty, and didn't care. Adrenaline was better than caffeine. I had the scent now. I opened a new file on my computer and named it simply Demolition Plan. The Zenith was 1,000 feet of glass and arrogant, standing tall in the city center. But here in my garage, surrounded by the ghosts of 1,000 inspections, I was already pouring the foundation for its destruction. I was going to take it apart bolt by bolt, and I was going to use Victoria Vance's own greed as the wrench. The night was just beginning, and for the first time in years, the hammer was back on the job. For the next 72 hours, I did not sleep. I existed in a state of high tensile alertness, the kind I used to feel when monitoring a bridge during a hurricane. I parked my truck 3 blocks away from the Vanguard tower, finding a spot with a direct line of sight to the 42nd floor. I had swapped my inspection helmet for a pair of high-powered digital binoculars, the kind used by land surveyors to read grade stakes from a mile away. Through the lenses, the glass facade of the zenith was not a barrier, it was a fishbowl. I watched my son, the project manager of a $100 million skyscraper, being reduced to an errand boy. I saw Victoria Vance storm into his office at 10 in the morning. Even from this distance, I could read the body language of a tyrant. She pointed a manicured finger at the floor. Leo, my tall, broad-shouldered boy, bowed his head. Moments later, I watched him leave the office carrying a small, fluffy white dog. He was walking the CEO's poodle. He walked it down the busy street, picking up after it while junior associates kids fresh out of college, who should have been reporting to him, snickered behind their hands. Later that afternoon, I saw him in the archives room. It was a glass-walled box filled with dusty file bankers. Victoria had him moving boxes. Not reviewing files, just moving them. He was hauling heavy crates from one side of the room to the other, sweating in his dress shirt, while Victoria stood outside chatting with a client, occasionally gesturing to Leo as if he were a hired mover she had picked up off the street. But the hardest part was watching Sarah. I saw her walk past the archive room. She was wearing a sharp white suit, looking every inch the corporate heiress. She paused and looked through the glass at her husband struggling with a 50-pound box of paper. There was no sympathy in her eyes. There was no outrage. She just checked her reflection in the glass, smoothed her hair, and kept walking. She had been fully assimilated. To the Vances, Leo was not a husband or a father figure. He was an accessory that had gone out of style, something to be discarded once its utility was exhausted. Compressive stress is a nasty force. It crushes materials from the outside in squeezing the molecules until they have nowhere to go but out. That is when things explode. I could see the compression happening to Leo. His posture was slumping. His movements were jerky and nervous. But on the third night, I saw something else. It was nearly midnight. The office was mostly dark, save for the cleaning crews on the lower floors. Leo was still there. He was sitting at his computer, the blue light illuminating his face. He was not working on blueprints. He was looking over his shoulder every 10 seconds. I zoomed in. He inserted a flash drive into the tower. His fingers flew across the keyboard. He was copying files. Fast. He pulled the drive out, shoved it into his sock, and immediately opened a solitaire game on the screen, just as a security guard walked past his door. My heart gave a solid thump. He was not just taking the abuse. He was fighting back in the only terrified, desperate way he knew how. He was building his own insurance policy. I needed to extract him, now. I sent him a text message from a burner number. Meet me at the Iron Skillet, 1 hour. Come alone. Do not tell Sarah. The Iron Skillet was a diner on the outskirts of town, a place where truckers and third-shift welders ate breakfast at 2 in the morning. It smelled of bacon grease and diesel fuel, the smell of honest work. I sat in a booth in the back corner facing the door. When Leo walked in, I barely recognized him. It had only been a few days since the gala, but he looked like he had aged 10 years. His skin was gray and pasty. There were dark circles under his eyes that looked like bruises. He wore a hoodie pulled up over his head, glancing around the diner like a fugitive. He slid into the booth opposite me and kept his head down. "Dad, I cannot stay long. If she tracks my phone—" "I bought you a Faraday bag," I said, sliding a small metallic pouch across the table. "Put your phone in it. It blocks the GPS signal. You are off the grid, son." He looked at the bag, then at me, and his hands were shaking as he shoved the device inside. "You should not be involved in this, Dad. You do not know what these people are capable of." "I know they are making you scrub toilets and walk dogs," I said, keeping my voice low and level. "I know you signed for 300 tons of phantom steel. I know you are terrified." Leo's head snapped up. His eyes widened in shock. How do you know about the steel?" Because I am your father, I said, and because I know a load-bearing lie when I see one. Talk to me, Leo. Why are you signing those logs? Why are you letting that woman destroy you? Leo slumped against the vinyl seat. He covered his face with his hands, and for a moment, I thought he was going to weep. But when he looked up, his eyes were dry and hollow. "It is not just the job, Dad," he whispered. 6 months ago, Victoria called me into her office. She showed me a bank account in the Cayman Islands. It was in my name. It had $500,000 in it. My jaw tightened. A setup. She told me that the money came from a vendor kickback scheme. Leo continued, his voice trembling. She said she had emails forged, obviously from my account, demanding the payments. She told me that if I ever tried to leave, or if I ever refused to sign off on the material substitutions, she would hand the file to the FBI. Embezzlement, I said. Federal prison time. 10 to 15 years, Leo said. And I would lose my architecture license forever. I would be a felon. Sarah sat there and watched her mother tell me this. She just said, "Do what Mom says, Leo. It is for the best." That is when I knew. I am not an employee. I am a scapegoat. They needed someone with a clean record and a license to sign off on the cheap materials so they could skim millions off the construction budget. If the building ever has issues, they point to me, show the fake bank account, and say I took bribes to approve bad steel. He looked at me pleading. I have to stay, Dad. I have to wait until the project is done and signed off. Victoria said if I play along until the grand opening, she will let me resign quietly and keep the license. If I quit now, I go to jail. I reached across the table and covered his trembling hand with my own. My hand was rough-scarred from years of handling rebar and concrete. His was smooth, an architect's hand, but it was cold as ice. Leo, I said, listen to me closely. In structural engineering, we have a rule. Rule number 1. When you discover the foundation is rotten, you do not try to paint over the cracks. You do not try to shore it up with 2x4s. You evacuate. You get everyone out and you condemn the structure. I can't evacuate, he said, his voice rising in panic. They have the evidence. The bank account exists, Dad. The money is there. I can't prove I didn't put it there. You can't, I agreed. But I can. What are you going to do? Fear spiked in his eyes. Dad, do not do anything crazy. Victoria has lawyers who earn more in an hour than you earned in a year. She will crush you. Let me worry about the crushing, I said. I need you to do exactly one thing. Keep your head down. Do not sign one more document. Not a delivery receipt, not a payroll check, nothing. If she asks, say you hurt your hand. Say you lost your digital key. Stall her. Dad, do you trust me? I asked. I put every ounce of authority I had into those 4 words. I looked at him with the same gaze I used to stare down corrupt contractors in the 80s. Leo hesitated. He looked at his father. Really looked at me for the first time in years. He saw the gray hair and the wrinkles, but he also saw the resolve. He nodded slowly. I trust you. Good. Now finish your coffee and go home. Do not tell Sarah you saw me. Act defeated. Act scared. It will not be hard because you are scared. But remember this, you are not alone in that hole anymore. I am down there with you and I brought a shovel. Leo left 10 minutes later. I stayed in the booth watching his taillights fade into the darkness. I did not feel fear for him anymore. I felt a cold, calculated determination. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Mike Kowalski. It is worse than you thought, Hammer. The company that shipped the steel is Apex Materials LLC. Registered address is a P.O. box in Delaware. But I tracked the trucking manifest. The metal was picked up from a scrapyard in Mexico called El Cementerio. It is melted down car chassis and rusted piping James. High impurities. Sulfur content is off the charts. It is brittle. If that building sways more than 6 inches, those beams will snap like dry twigs. I stared at the screen. My blood ran cold. It was not just fraud. It was a death trap. a 50-story tomb waiting for a strong wind. Then a second text came through from Mike. One more thing. The owner of Apex Materials is hidden behind 3 shell core, but I have a friend at the bank. The funding for Apex comes from a trust. The V.S. Family Trust. V and S. Victoria and Sarah. Sarah was not just complicit, she was a beneficiary. She was profiting from the very scheme that was enslaving her husband. I put the phone down on the table. The waitress came by to refill my coffee, but I waved her away. I had come into this thinking I needed to save my son from a bad job and a bullying mother-in-law. I thought I was fighting a custody battle for his dignity. I was wrong. I was fighting a war against a family that was willing to kill thousands of people to save a few $1,000,000 on construction costs, and they were going to use my son's corpse to plug the hole in the dam when it broke. I stood up and threw a $20 bill on the table. I was done inspecting. I was done observing. I walked out to my truck. The night air was cool, but I felt burning hot. I opened the toolbox in the bed of my truck and pulled out a large, heavy sledgehammer. I weighed it in my hand. It was an old tool, scarred and battered, but perfectly balanced. I was not going to use it on the building. I had a better target. I was going to use the law, the money, and the cold, hard facts of physics to dismantle Vanguard Holdings. I would not just extract Leo. I would bring the entire corrupt edifice crashing down around Victoria Vance's ears. I started the engine. The radio crackled to life with a late-night country song about heartbreak, but I turned it off. I needed silence to think. I needed to plan the demolition. The first step was reinforcement. I needed leverage. I needed to own something they could not ignore. I drove toward the city, the lights of the zenith visible in the distance taunting me. Enjoy the view while you can, Victoria, I thought. Because I just found the stress fracture in your empire. And I am about to apply the pressure. I pulled into the loading dock of the Zenith at 3 a.m. I was not driving my Ford tonight. I was driving a white panel van with Metro air heating, stenciled on the side, a favor from an old buddy who owed me for signing off on a questionable retaining wall back in '95. I wore a gray jumpsuit with a name tag that said Earl and carried a tool bag that weighed 40 pounds. Inside that bag was not a wrench set. It was the kind of equipment that forensic engineers use to diagnose a crime scene. The night security guard was barely awake. He glanced at my clipboard, which had a forged work order for an emergency compressor failure on the 35th floor. "A C is out in the server room," I grunted, chewing on a toothpick. "Unless you want the mainframe to melt down and lose all your payroll data, I suggest you open the gate." He buzzed me in without a second look. People never look at the maintenance guy. We are part of the furniture. I took the service elevator up, but I did not stop at the server room. I hit the emergency stop button between the 10th and 11th floors. This was the mechanical transfer level, the guts of the building where the massive load-bearing columns transitioned from the parking garage structure to the tower proper. If they had cut corners on the concrete, this is where the evidence would be hiding. I pried the elevator doors open and stepped onto the concrete ledge. The air here was hot and smelled of grease and high-voltage ozone. I switched on my headlamp. The main support columns stood like silent sentinels in the gloom. They were massive, 6 feet in diameter, wrapped in smooth gray concrete. To the untrained eye, they looked perfect. But I was not here to look. I was here to listen. I pulled out my Pundit Lab ultrasonic pulse velocity tester. It is a handheld device that shoots sound waves through concrete. The speed of the sound tells you the density of the material. Dense, high-quality concrete transmits sound fast. Loose, honeycomb-filled garbage transmits it slow. I applied the coupling gel to the side of column A4. I pressed the transducers against the surface. Ping. The digital readout flickered. 11,000 feet per second. My stomach dropped. That number should have been 14,000 minimum. I moved to column B7, 10,500. I moved to the shear wall that formed the core of the elevator shaft. This wall is supposed to resist wind shear. If this fails, the building snaps in half, 9,800. I stared at the glowing numbers in the dark. This was not concrete. It was glorified sidewalk pavement. They had diluted the mix with too much sand and water to stretch the volume. It saved them money, sure, but it reduced the compressive strength by 40%. The design specs called for 8,000 psi. This stuff was barely hitting 4,000. "You are not a building," I whispered to the pillar. "You are a tombstone." I moved deeper into the mechanical room. I needed to check the fire suppression system. I found the main riser pipe, a 6-inch red steel tube that was supposed to carry water to the sprinklers on the upper floors. I tapped it with my wrench. Clang. It rang hollow. That was normal, the system was dry until activated. But the sound was too high-pitched. It sounded thin. I unscrewed a pressure gauge from the manifold. There was no hiss of air. No water. Nothing. I shone my flashlight into the hole. It was empty. Not just dry, but unconnected. The pipe did not go anywhere. It just ended in a cap inside the wall. The entire sprinkler system on this floor was a prop. A dummy installation to fool a visual inspection. If a fire started here, there would be no water. Just panic and smoke. I felt a cold rage settling in my chest, displacing the fear. This was premeditated murder for profit. I packed up my gear and moved to Phase 2. I took the stairs up to the 42nd floor, the executive level. The cameras were on a loop I had hacked into the local feed from the van before I entered, freezing the image for 20 minutes. I had to move fast. The executive conference room was unlocked. It smelled of expensive leather and stale ambition. I climbed up onto the mahogany table and unscrewed the faceplate of the smoke detector. I planted a high-gain listening device inside, tapping it into the building's own power line, so the battery would never die. I placed a second bug under the lip of the heavy marble sideboard where the liquor was kept. People always talk freely when they are pouring a drink. Just as I was screwing the faceplate back on, I heard voices in the hallway. Real voices, not the security guard. I froze. It was 3:30 in the morning. Who was here? I dropped from the table and rolled underneath it, pulling my tool bag with me. The heavy tablecloth concealed me completely. The door opened. The lights flickered on. "I am telling you the cash flow is getting tight," a male voice said. I recognized it. It was Marcus Thorne, the CFO of Vanguard. "Stop whining, Marcus," a woman's voice snapped. Victoria Vance. "The liquidity is fine. We just need to hold out until the grand opening next month. Once the tenants sign the leases and the bank releases the final tranche of the construction loan, we are solvent." "And then?" Marcus asked. I heard the clink of glass. He was at the sideboard right above my bug. "Then we initiate the exit strategy," Victoria said. Her voice was calm, terrifyingly so. "We declare bankruptcy for the subsidiary, Zenith Construction LLC. We insulate the parent company. When the cracks start showing up in 5 years, and they will, we will be long gone." "What about the liability?" Marcus asked. "The material logs, the inspections." "That is taken care of." Victoria laughed softly. "We have our patsy. Leo signed everything. Every bag of sand, every stick of rebar. The paper trail leads directly to his desk. We will claim he went rogue. We will say he was taking kickbacks from suppliers to swap the materials. We will act shocked. Oh, our poor son-in-law, how could he betray us like this? The insurance pays out. We keep the building money, and Leo goes to prison for negligence." I bit my own knuckle to keep from screaming. Hearing it from Leo was one thing. Hearing it from her own mouth was another. She was discussing the destruction of my son's life, with the same casual tone she would use to order a salad. "Is he going to break?" Marcus asked. He looked shaky. "He is weak," Victoria said. "He will do what he is told because he is terrified of losing his precious license. And if he tries to talk, we release the bank records. The Cayman account is already seated with the bribe money. He is framed so tight, he could not slip a piece of paper through the cracks." They finished their drinks and left. The lights went off. I waited 10 minutes in the dark, my heart pounding a rhythm against the floorboards. I had the audio. It was recording to the cloud server I had set up. But audio can be dismissed as hearsay in court if obtained illegally. I needed the hard data. I crawled out and went to Victoria's desk. It was locked, but a standard wafer lock is a joke to anyone who owns a tension wrench. I picked it in 10 seconds. I booted up her computer. It was password protected, of course, but I did not need her password. I pulled a small device from my bag, a land turtle, and plugged it into the Ethernet port behind the tower. It creates a physical bridge allowing me to bypass the login screen and mount the hard drive as an external storage device on my own laptop. I started the transfer. Project Zenith, real cost folder, offshore accounts ledger, vendor kickbacks spreadsheet. The progress bar crawled. 5%, 10%. Suddenly, my radio crackled. It was the security feed I was monitoring. "Hey, Earl!" The guard's voice came through the static. "You still up there? The system shows the elevator moving on its own." My blood ran cold. I had forgotten to lock the elevator on the 10th floor. "Yeah, just finishing up." I keyed the mic, trying to sound bored. "Testing the pressure sensors. Be down in 5. "Copy that. Hurry up, shift changes in 20. The progress bar hit 90%, 95. The door handle to the office jiggled. I yanked the device out at 99%. I shoved the computer tower back into place and relocked the drawer. I grabbed my bag and scanned the room. Nothing out of place. I moved to the window. There was no balcony. I was trapped. The door handle turned. It was locked, but I heard a key sliding in. It must be the night cleaners. I looked up. The drop ceiling. I grabbed a chair, popped a tile, and hauled myself up into the plenum space, just as the door opened. I lay flat on the metal supports, breathing through my mouth to keep silent. Below me, a janitor pushed a vacuum cleaner into the room. I crawled through the dusty ceiling space, navigating over ducts and conduit until I reached the hallway. I dropped down into the service closet, dusted myself off, and walked calmly to the elevator. I rode down to the lobby. The guard was drinking coffee. "Fixed it?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, patting my bag. "Compressor was shot. Had to bypass the regulator. It will hold." "Good. Have a good night." I walked out to the van, threw the bag in the back, and drove away. I did not speed. I drove at exactly the limit until I was 5 miles clear. Then I pulled over into a deserted parking lot and slumped over the steering wheel, shaking uncontrollably. The adrenaline crash hit me like a physical blow. I opened the laptop. I checked the files. It was all there. The real invoices showing the scrap metal. The emails between Victoria and the shell companies. The wire transfers to the fake account in Leo's name. But the most damning thing was the structural simulation they had run themselves. There was a PDF file named Failure Mode Analysis, Internal Eyes Only. I opened it. It was a graph showing the building's stability over time. The red line crossed the failure threshold at year 7. They knew. They knew the building would collapse. They had done the math, realized it would fall down, and decided to build it anyway, because the profit margin was higher than the cost of human life. I drove home as the sun was coming up. I went straight to the war room. I printed everything. I pinned the blueprints to the wall. I overlaid the UPV test results. I mapped the financial flows. By noon, I had a document that was 3 inches thick. I bound it in a heavy black folder. On the cover, I typed a title in bold, 20-point font, The Zenith, a premeditated disaster. It was not just a report. It was a weapon. And I was going to fire it, right at the heart of their topping out ceremony. I looked at the picture of Leo scrubbing the floor that I had taped to the center of my board. "Get up, son," I whispered. "Your shift is over." I had the evidence. The smoking gun was a 3-inch thick binder of structural lies and financial rot. Most men would have taken that binder straight to the district attorney, or maybe the FBI. But I knew the system. If I filed a report now, it would get buried in discovery motions for 3 years. Victoria Vance would hire an army of lawyers to argue that my ultrasonic readings were flawed or that my listening device was inadmissible. She would drag it out until Leo was in prison and I was bankrupt. No, I did not want a lawsuit. I wanted an execution, a corporate one. I needed to control the battlefield. In construction, we call this shoring up. Before you tear down a wall, you brace the ceiling so the whole thing does not come down on your head. I made a phone call to Washington, D.C. I dialed a number that belonged to the National Construction Safety Board. "Director's office," a crisp voice answered. "Tell Director Holloway that the hammer is on the line," I said. "And tell him I found another unstable bridge." 30 seconds later, Bill Holloway was on the phone. We had worked together on the investigation of the '95 stadium collapse. He knew my work. He knew I did not cry wolf. "James," Bill's voice was warm but cautious. "It has been years. What kind of trouble have you found?" "The kind that kills people, Bill," I said. "I am sending you a secure file. It is a preliminary report on the Vanguard Zenith project in San Antonio. Do not open an official investigation yet. Just read it. And have a team ready to fly down here on Friday." "Friday," Bill asked. "What happens on Friday?" "That is when the building comes down," I said. "Figuratively speaking. Just be ready." Next, I needed ammunition. Financial ammunition. I drove to the bank, not the drive-through. I went into the manager's office. I had been saving for 40 years. My pension, my consulting fees, the life insurance payout from Maria. It was a nest egg meant for a quiet retirement of fishing trips and grandkids. I liquidated it all. I signed the papers to mortgage my house, the house I had built with my own hands to the hilt. Every dollar of equity I had, I pulled out. "Mr. Johnson, are you sure?" the loan officer asked, looking at me like I was having a senile episode. "This is a high-risk move at your age. If you default—" "I will not default," I said, signing my name with a flourish. "I am investing in a demolition project." With the cash in hand, nearly $800,000, I did not go to a casino. I went to see a man named Saul. Saul was a distressed debt broker. He bought bad loans from banks for pennies on the dollar and squeezed the debtors for payment. "Vanguard Holdings," I told him, sitting in his smoke-filled office. "They are over-leveraged. I know for a fact they missed their interest payment on the mezzanine loan last month. The bank is looking to unload that paper before the regulators see it." Saul raised an eyebrow. "Vanguard. They are building that shiny new tower. They are golden." "They are pyrite, Saul. Fool's gold. The bank knows it. That is why they will sell the debt cheap. They want it off their books before the quarterly review." I was right. The regional bank holding Vanguard's secondary construction loan was nervous. They had heard whispers of the cost overruns. I used my $800,000 to buy a controlling interest in a tranche of debt worth $5 million. I bought it through a blind trust I named Bedrock LLC. By Wednesday afternoon, I was legally the senior creditor for the Zenith project. Victoria Vance did not know it yet, but she effectively owed me her skyscraper. Thursday morning, I sent the email to Leo. I used an encrypted Proton Mail account. The subject line was blank. The body was simple: Operation Reinforcement. Phase 2. 1. Do not speak near the Alexa or your phone. They are listening. 2. Install the Voice Memos app on your smartwatch. Record every conversation you have with Victoria or Sarah from this moment on. 3. Forward all emails from your work account to this secure address. Do not delete them from your sent folder that looks suspicious. Just forward and archive. 4. Be the perfect employee. Smile, nod. Say, "Yes, ma'am." Let them think you are broken. Leo replied 3 minutes later with a single word: ready. Thursday afternoon, the invitation went out. The topping out ceremony. In skyscraper construction, this is a sacred tradition. It is when the final steel beam is placed at the highest point of the building. It is supposed to be a celebration of engineering and hard work. Victoria was turning it into a coronation. She invited the mayor, the city council, the major investors, and the entire press corps of San Antonio. It was going to be a black tie gala on the observation deck of the 50th floor. Champagne, caviar, and a live band. I received a text from Leo that night. She wants me to work the bar. She says since I messed up the floor last time, I can make it up to her by serving drinks to the investors. She wants to show everyone I am learning humility. My hand tightened around the phone. Humility. She called it humility. I called it torture. She wanted to parade him in front of the city's elite, a man with a master's degree in architecture pouring gin and tonics like a servant. It was a power move designed to strip away the last shreds of his dignity before she threw him to the wolves. I called him. Leo, I said, listen to me. Do exactly what she says. Wear the uniform. Pour the drinks. Smile at the guests. Dad, I cannot. Leo's voice cracked. I cannot do it again. Sarah is bringing her new tennis instructor. They are going to laugh at me. Let them laugh, I said. Laughter makes people careless. It makes them feel safe. And when people feel safe, they make mistakes. What are you going to do? He asked. I am going to attend the party, I said. You can't. Security will be tighter than Fort Knox. You are not on the list. I do not need a list, I said. I own the debt on the building. Technically, I own the door they are guarding. But do not worry about that. Just worry about one thing. What? Wear comfortable shoes, I said. Bring your best running shoes. Put them in your gym bag and hide it behind the bar. Running shoes. Why? Because when the walls come tumbling down, you need to be able to move fast. And Leo, yeah. When you see me walk through those doors, do not look at me. Do not acknowledge me. Just get ready to run. Friday morning arrived with a sky the color of bruised iron. A storm front was moving in from the Gulf, heavy and oppressive. It was fitting. I stood in front of my closet. I pushed aside my flannel shirts and my work overalls. In the back, covered in plastic, was a suit. It was charcoal gray wool, double-breasted. I had bought it 20 years ago for Maria's funeral. It was out of fashion, slightly moth-eaten at the cuffs, and smelled of cedar and sadness. I put it on. It was a little loose in the shoulders now. I had lost some bulk since I stopped swinging a hammer every day, but it still fit. I tied my tie a simple black knot. I polished my old dress boots until they shone like obsidian. I looked in the mirror. I did not see a retired inspector. I saw a man going to war. I picked up my leather briefcase. It was battered, the corners worn down to the raw hide. Inside, it did not contain a resume or a sales pitch. It contained the binder, the audio recordings on a flash drive, the purchase agreement for the debt, and the badge. My old state inspector's badge polished to a mirror shine. I drove to the city. The zenith loomed ahead, its glass peak, disappearing into the low clouds. It looked impressive. It looked invincible. But I knew the truth. It was a hollow shell held together by greed and fraud. I parked the truck in a public lot 2 blocks away. I walked toward the building. The wind was picking up, whipping my tie around my neck. I could feel the change in air pressure. At the entrance, the red carpet was rolled out. Limousines were dropping off men in tuxedos and women in glittering gowns. The press was there, cameras flashing. I walked past the velvet rope. The bouncer, a massive man with an earpiece, stepped in front of me. "Invitation," he grunted. I did not stop. I did not slow down. I looked him dead in the eye with the gaze of a man who has stared down collapsing tunnels. "I am the unexpected guest," I said. I didn't wait for him to process that. I just kept walking, slipping into the slipstream of a large group of dignitaries. He hesitated, confused by my confidence, and in that second of hesitation, I was inside. The elevator ride up was silent. The other guests looked at my frayed cuffs and my old suit with mild amusement. They thought I was eccentric. They thought I was some old money eccentric who didn't care about fashion. They had no idea. The elevator doors opened on the 50th floor. The wind howled outside the glass, but inside the music was playing. The party was in full swing. I stepped out onto the plush carpet. I saw the champagne tower. I saw the ice sculpture of the building. I saw Victoria Vance holding court in the center of the room looking like a queen. And I saw Leo. He was behind the bar wearing a white vest and a black bow tie. He was shaking a martini shaker. His face was pale, but his eyes were focused. He saw me enter. He did not blink. He did not smile. He just set the shaker down and moved his hand slightly toward the gym bag, hidden under the counter. Good boy. I gripped the handle of my briefcase. The weight of it was comforting. This was not a party. This was a demolition site. And I was the wrecking ball. The music swelled. Victoria raised her glass for a toast. To the zenith, she cried. To the future, to the truth, I whispered. I took a step forward. The floor felt solid beneath my feet, but I knew better. It was about to give way, but not because of gravity, because of me. The atmosphere inside the grand ballroom of the Zenith was not just air-conditioned, it was pressurized. Outside the floor-to-ceiling glass walls, a Texas storm was brewing, flashing silent lightning across the black horizon. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of expensive perfume roast beef and the metallic tang of old money. I stood in the shadow of a decorative pillar near the service entrance, clutching my briefcase. To the 300 guests sipping vintage champagne, I was invisible. I was just an old man in a dated suit, perhaps a confused relative or a forgotten investor. They looked right through me. But I saw everything. I saw the way the crystal chandeliers trembled ever so slightly when the wind gusted against the 50-story tower. I saw the hairline fractures in the plaster near the ceiling cornice's stress marks that should not appear in a building that was less than a month old. And most painfully, I saw my son. Leo was moving through the crowd like a ghost, haunting his own funeral. He was dressed in the stiff white jacket and black trousers of the catering staff. In his hands he balanced a heavy silver tray laden with flutes of champagne. He was not behind the bar anymore. Victoria had ordered him onto the floor. She wanted him to circulate. She wanted him to be seen. I watched him approach a group of men near the center of the room. I recognized them. Two of them were junior partners at the architecture firm where Leo had interned. Another was a college classmate who had graduated second in their class, right behind Leo. "Champagne, sir?" Leo asked. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. The classmate turned. He was holding a scotch. He looked at Leo, then at the tray, then back at Leo's face. A slow, cruel smile spread across his lips. "Leo," the man asked, loud enough for the circle to hear. "My God, I heard you were working on the project, but I did not know you were serving the project." The other men chuckled. It was that low, clubby laughter that excludes anyone not wearing a $5,000 watch. "I am the project manager," Leo said, quietly, reciting the line he must have practiced to keep his sanity. "I am just helping out tonight. We are short-staffed." "Right," the classmate said, taking a glass from the tray without saying thank you. "Project manager. Well, manage me a napkin, will you? I spilled a drop." Leo stood there for a second. I saw his knuckles turn white around the edge of the tray. I saw the muscles in his jaw jump. For a heartbeat, I thought he was going to swing the tray at the man's head. But then he nodded a sharp, jerky motion and walked away. My heart ached, but I stayed in the shadows. Endure it, son, I thought. Let them load the spring. The recoil is going to be spectacular. Leo moved toward the VIP section. This was the gauntlet. Sitting on a velvet banquette was Sarah. She looked radiant in a red silk gown that hugged her frame like a second skin. She was laughing, her head thrown back, her hand resting casually on the knee of a man I did not know. He was young tan with teeth that looked like they had been capped with porcelain. He whispered something in her ear, and she giggled a sound that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. Leo approached the table. He had to. It was his assigned section. "More drinks?" Leo asked. He did not look at the man. He looked at his wife. Sarah stopped laughing. She looked at Leo with an expression of mild annoyance, like he was a waiter who had interrupted a good joke. "Not now, Leo," she hissed. "Can't you see we are talking?" "Just doing my job," Leo said. "Well, do it somewhere else," Sarah said. She turned back to the man, dismissing her husband with a wave of her hand. "Sorry about that. The help is so intrusive tonight." The man glanced at Leo, then back at Sarah. Isn't that your husband?" Sarah shrugged, taking a sip of her drink. "Technically, for now." Leo turned and walked away. He did not look back. He walked straight past me, his eyes fixed on the floor. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out, scraped clean of all pride and hope. He moved to the side of the stage and stood there, melting into the background, just another servant waiting for orders. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. The band stopped playing. Victoria Vance walked out. She was wearing a silver gown that shimmered like chainmail. She looked powerful. She looked victorious. She approached the microphone, and the room fell into a respectful silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria began, her voice booming through the high-end sound system. "Distinguished guests, welcome to the Zenith." Applause rippled through the room. She waited for it to die down, soaking it up. "My father started Vanguard Holdings 40 years ago with a shovel and a dream," she continued. "He believed that a building was more than just steel and glass. It was a promise of safety, a promise of prosperity. And tonight, we fulfill that promise." She swept her arm toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. "The Zenith is not just the tallest building in San Antonio," she declared. "It is the safest. It is a fortress in the sky. We spared no expense. We cut no corners. While other developers were worried about margins, we were worried about excellence." I gripped the handle of my briefcase tighter. The lie was so bold, so absolute, it was almost admirable. "But a building is nothing without its people," Victoria said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "And I want to take a moment to acknowledge the team. Specifically, I want to acknowledge family." She turned and looked toward the side of the stage. "Leo," she called out. "Come up here." The spotlight swung wildly, searching the darkness until it found Leo. He froze. He looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. He shook his head slightly, a silent plea. "Come on up, Leo," Victoria said, her voice sugary sweet, but underlined with steel. "Don't be shy." The crowd applauded politely. Leo had no choice. He set his tray down on a side table and walked up the steps to the stage. He stood next to Victoria, looking down at his shoes. The contrast was brutal. She in her shimmering silver, he in his waiter's uniform. Victoria put an arm around his shoulders. It looked like a hug, but I knew it was a vice grip. "This is Leo Johnson," Victoria announced to the room. "My son-in-law, and the project manager of the Zenith." A murmur went through the crowd. They were confused by the uniform. "Now I know what you are thinking," Victoria laughed lightly. "Why is the project manager dressed like a caterer?" "Well, that is the Vanguard spirit," Leo insisted. "He told me, 'Victoria, I want to serve this company in every way possible.'" "Isn't that right, Leo?" She squeezed his shoulder. Leo nodded mechanically. "But there is another reason," Victoria said, leaning into the microphone. "Leo is a perfectionist. Earlier tonight we had a little spill. A nasty red wine stain on the marble floor." "And do you know what Leo did? He didn't call a janitor. He got down on his knees in his tuxedo, and he scrubbed it himself." She paused for effect. "He scrubbed it until it sparkled," she said. "Because that is the only way Leo knows how to work, from the ground up. Literally." She turned to him, her smile wide and predatory. "And I must say, Leo," she said into the mic, "you scrubbed very nicely. Maybe we have found your true calling." The crowd hesitated for a split second, unsure if it was a joke. Then, seeing Victoria smile, they laughed. It started as a titter and grew into a roar. 300 people, the wealthiest in the city, laughing at a man who had designed the floor they were standing on. Leo stood there, taking it. He did not move. He did not breathe. He just stared into the blinding light of the spotlight, dying 1,000 deaths. This was it. The breaking point. I reached into my pocket. My hand found the small remote control I had synced to the laptop hidden in the ceiling plenum 2 nights ago. "Laugh while you can," I whispered. I pressed the button. Behind Victoria, the massive LED screen that had been displaying the Vanguard logo flickered. The golden V glitches out, replaced by a wall of static. The laughter died down. People pointed. The audio system let out a high-pitched squeal that made everyone cover their ears. Then, the image stabilized. It was not a logo. It was a schematic. A high-contrast black and red X-ray view of the building's support columns. Superimposed over the image were the results of my ultrasonic tests. Huge, jagged red lines ran through the columns like veins of poison. The text was large and bold. Warning: structural integrity, critical. Concrete density, 42% below code. Status unsafe. A gasp went through the room. Victoria turned around, her eyes widening as she saw the screen. "Turn it off!" she screamed at the sound technician in the back. "Cut the feed." But I had locked the system. The technician was frantically hitting buttons that did nothing. Then came the sound. My voice, recording from the night in the conference room, boomed through the speakers. It was crystal clear, amplified to concert volume. "We declare bankruptcy for the subsidiary. We insulate the parent company. When the cracks start showing up in 5 years, we will be long gone." The room went deadly silent. Victoria froze. Her face drained of all color. Then the other voice on the recording, Marcus Thorne, the CFO. "What about the liability?" The material logs, and Victoria's voice again, dripping with malice. "That is taken care of. We have our patsy. Leo signed everything. We will claim he went rogue. The insurance pays out, we keep the building money, and Leo goes to prison." The recording looped. "Leo goes to prison. Leo goes to prison." On stage, Victoria backed away from the microphone, as if it were a snake. She looked at the crowd. The guests were not laughing anymore. They were staring at her with horror. Sarah had stood up from her table, her hand over her mouth. Leo looked up at the screen. He heard the words. He saw the proof. He looked at Victoria, and for the first time in years, his spine straightened. He took a step away from her. The double doors at the back of the ballroom slammed open. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Every head turned. I stepped into the room. I had shed the moth-eaten gray suit jacket. I was wearing my old windbreaker, the navy blue one, with the bold yellow letters across the back, Federal Inspector. On my chest, my gold badge caught the light of the chandeliers. It was polished to a shine that hurt the eyes. I held my thick black binder in one hand and my briefcase in the other. I did not look like a waiter. I did not look like a retiree. I looked like Judgment Day. I walked down the center aisle. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I saw the security guards start to move toward me, but I held up a hand. "Federal investigation," I barked. My voice was the voice that had commanded cranes and bulldozers. "Anyone who touches me is obstructing justice." The guards stopped. They looked at the badge. They looked at the screen. They looked at Victoria. They stayed put. I walked straight to the stage. I climbed the stairs, my heavy boots thudding against the wood. I walked past Leo. I gave him a single nod. "Run," the nod said, "or stay and fight. It is your choice now." I stopped in front of Victoria Vance. She was trembling. Up close, under the harsh stage lights, she looked old. Her makeup was cracking along the laugh lines that were now lines of panic. "Who are you?" she whispered. Her microphone was still live, so the whole room heard the tremor in her voice. I placed the heavy binder on the podium. It landed with a sound like a gavel striking a block. I leaned into the microphone. My name is James Johnson, I said. My voice was calm, cold, and absolute. I am a senior structural inspector. I am the man who owns the debt on this building. I looked out at the crowd, then turned my gaze back to her. And I added my eyes, locking onto hers. I am the father of the man you just tried to bury. The recording looped again in the background. Leo goes to prison. Nobody is going to prison today, Victoria, I said. Except you. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a laser pointer. I aimed it at the screen behind us, putting a red dot right on the center column of the diagram. Ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the room. You are standing on a 42nd floor. The columns holding you up are made of sand and garbage. The fire suppression system is a prop, and the wind outside is gusting to 50 miles per hour. I saw the panic start to ripple through the eyes of the guests. If I were you, I said, I would take the stairs. Pandemonium broke out. But I did not watch the crowd. I watched Victoria. I watched her empire crumble in real time right there on her face. The concrete hadn't failed yet, but the foundation of her life just had. The silence that followed my entrance was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, the kind of silence that happens right before a suspension cable snaps. 300 of San Antonio's wealthiest citizens stood frozen, their champagne flutes halfway to their mouths, their eyes darting between the screen, displaying the structural rot, and the old man in the windbreaker standing on the stage. Victoria Vance was the first to break the vacuum. She did not gasp, she shrieked. It was a primal sound stripped of all her corporate polish. "Security!" she screamed, her voice cracking under the strain. "Get him out! Get this lunatic out of my building immediately!" 2 large guards in black suits stepped forward from the wings. They were hired muscle men who knew how to bounce drunks from a club, not how to handle a federal situation. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document, stamped with the seal of the state of Texas. I held it up high, letting the stage lights catch the official watermark. "Stand down!" I bellowed. My voice was a hammer, striking an anvil honed by 40 years of shouting over diesel engines and pile drivers. According to Article 103 of the National Building Safety Code, I am declaring this structure a Level 1 immediate hazard zone. I am assuming emergency jurisdiction over this site. The guards hesitated. They looked at Victoria, then at the badge on my chest. "He is lying," Victoria yelled, pointing a trembling finger at me. "He is nobody. He is just the father of that incompetent waiter. Throw him out." She turned to the crowd, her face a mask of desperate fabrication. "Ladies and gentlemen, please. This is a sick prank. A disgruntled relative trying to ruin our evening. There is nothing wrong with the building. It is a deep fake video." Security. The guards took another step. I moved faster. I walked to the VIP table right in front of the stage, the table where the major investors from the bank were sitting looking pale and confused. I took the heavy black binder I was carrying, the premeditated disaster report, and I slammed it down onto the glass tabletop. The sound was explosive. The heavy thud caused the silverware to jump and a crystal vase to topple over, shattering against the floor. "You want to know who I am?" I asked, my voice dropping to a low, lethal register that carried to the back of the room. "I am not just a father, and I am certainly not a nobody." I looked at the lead investor, a man named Mr. Henderson, who represented the bank holding the secondary loan. "Check the ownership records, Mr. Henderson," I said. As of 9 o'clock this morning, a company called Bedrock Limited Liability Company purchased the entirety of the senior debt tranche from your bank's distressed asset division. I paid $5 million cash for the privilege of holding the mortgage on this glass coffin. Henderson's eyes widened. "Bedrock, that is you." "That is me," I said. "I own 65% of the debt on this building, Victoria, which means, legally speaking, I am not trespassing. I am inspecting my property, and you are evicted." Victoria looked like she had been slapped. "You You bought the debt? With what money? You are a pensioner. I liquidated everything, I said. Every penny. Because unlike you, I know the difference between value and price. And right now, the price of your lies is due. I raised my hand and snapped my fingers. The double doors at the back of the room opened again. This time, it was not me who walked in. It was a squad of 6 men and women wearing yellow hard hats and navy blue jackets emblazoned with NCSB, the National Construction Safety Board. Flanking them were 4 officers from the Economic Crimes Division of the San Antonio Police Department. Leading the pack was Bill Halloway, the director, holding a Geiger counter-sized device in his hand. "Secure the exits," Bill ordered calmly. "Nobody leaves with any digital devices. We are seizing all servers." The room erupted into murmurs of panic. The illusion of the gala was shattered. The reality of a crime scene was setting in. I ignored the police. I ignored the screaming investors. I had only one target left. I walked across the stage to where Leo was standing. He was still freezing there, holding that silver tray. He looked paralyzed, trapped between the habit of obedience and the shock of liberation. He looked at me with wide, terrified eyes, as if he expected me to wake him up from a dream. I stopped 2 feet in front of him. I looked at the white waiter's jacket. I looked at the bow tie. I looked at the tray of half-empty glasses he was clutching like a lifeline. "Put it down," I said softly. Leo's hands shook. "Dad, I said put it down." He didn't move. The conditioning was too deep. Victoria had spent 3 years breaking him, turning him into a machine that served her needs. I didn't wait. I reached out with my left hand and grabbed the edge of the silver tray. I yanked it violently from his grasp. I threw it onto the floor with all the force I had left in my body. Crash. The sound of shattering glass and twisting metal was deafening in the stunned ballroom. Champagne sprayed across the polished floor. The tray spun like a coin and settled with a final ringing clatter. "Lift your head up," I commanded. My voice was not angry at him. It was fierce for him. "Look at me, son. You are an architect. You are a father. You are a man. You are not their slave. And you are definitely not a waiter." Leo looked at the broken glass. Then he looked at Victoria, who was watching in horror. Then he looked at me. I saw the change happen. It was slow, like a crack forming in ice, but it was there. The fear in his eyes began to recede, replaced by a dawn of realization. He straightened his back. He reached up and tore the black bow tie from his neck, dropping it onto the pile of broken glass. "I am done," Leo whispered. Then louder, "I am done." "You have no right," Victoria shrieked, rushing toward us. She stopped a few feet away, her chest heaving. "This is a hostile takeover. I will sue you. I will sue all of you. That report is a fabrication. That video is a lie." She turned to the investors, desperate to salvage the narrative. "Please listen to me. This man is senile. He is using fake data. The building is perfectly safe. We passed every inspection. Look around you. The floor is solid. The walls are solid." I turned to face her. I felt a cold calm wash over me. She wanted to talk about solidity. Fine. Let us talk about physics. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a handheld device. It was a high-powered structural laser scanner, the kind used to detect microfractures in nuclear containment domes. "You say it is solid, Victoria," I asked. "Let us ask the concrete." I walked over to the main structural pillar in the center of the room. It was wrapped in decorative drywall and gold leaf, hiding the raw concrete beneath. "This is column C4, I announced to the room. "It carries the load of the 10 floors above us. Approximately 4,000 tons of dead weight." I pressed the device against the column. I hit the projection button. A grid of green laser light fanned out, covering the pillar. Then the device processed the density reading and projected the result directly onto the gold leaf surface in glowing red numbers. Density, 2,200 pounds per square inch. Void ratio high. "Read it," I shouted, pointing at the pillar. Standard code requires 5,000 pounds per square inch for a building of this height. This column is sitting at 2,200. That is not structural concrete, ladies and gentlemen. That is driveway gravel. I turned the laser to the ceiling, projecting the scan onto the support beams. Stress fracture detected. Length 8 feet. The red line of the laser traced a jagged path across the ceiling plaster, revealing a crack that was invisible to the naked eye, but glaringly obvious to the sensor. "Do you see that?" I asked, my voice cutting through the air. "That is a shear crack. It means the building is already twisting in the wind. It means the steel inside that concrete is stretching. It means we are not standing in a ballroom. We are standing in a house of cards that is waiting for a sneeze to knock it down." Victoria stared at the red numbers projected on her expensive decor. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The undeniable math of the situation had finally silenced her. Mr. Henderson, the banker, stood up. His face was gray. Is that real?" he stammered. "Is that data real?" "It is real." Bill Halloway stepped forward, his NCSB jacket rustling. "My team just confirmed the readings in the basement. The foundation is compromised. This building is structurally unsound." The word unsound hung in the air like smoke. Then panic set in. It didn't start with a scream. It started with movement. The investors' men who made their living calculating risk did the math instantly. Staying here had a 0% return on investment and a 100% probability of death. Mr. Henderson ran. He didn't walk. He ran for the emergency stairwell. That broke the dam. "Move! Get to the stairs!" someone shouted. The room dissolved into chaos. Women in gowns kicked off their heels and sprinted. Men in tuxedos shoved past each other. The servers dropped their trays and fled. It was a stampede of the elite, stripping away their dignity in the face of survival. Victoria stood alone in the center of the swirling crowd. She was bumped and jostled. Someone spilled a drink on her silver dress. She looked around wild-eyed. "Stop!" she screamed. "Come back, it is safe, it is my building." I stood still, watching the exodus. Leo stood beside me, unmoving. We were the eye of the storm. "It is over, Victoria," I said. "The physics won." She spun on me, her eyes filled with venom. "You ruined me. You old fool. You burned your own money to do this. You are bankrupt too." "I spent money," I said. "You spent your soul. I think I got the better deal." I looked at Sarah. She was standing near the window, clutching her purse, looking at her mother, and then at Leo. She took a step toward Leo, her eyes pleading. "Leo," she said, her voice trembling. "Leo, we need to go. Help me." Leo looked at her. He looked at the woman who had watched him scrub floors. He looked at the woman who had laughed while her mother threatened him with prison. "You have legs, Sarah," Leo said. His voice was calm, detached. "Use them." He turned his back on her. Sarah let out a sob and ran after the crowd, disappearing into the stairwell. Now it was just us. Me, Leo, the police, and Victoria. The police officers moved in. One of them, a detective with a grim face, pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "Victoria Vance," he said. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, endangerment of public safety, and grand larceny." Victoria backed away until she hit the very pillar I had scanned. The red laser projection of the stress fracture was still glowing on the wall next to her head, branding her. "No," she whispered. "I am Vanguard. I am this city." "You are a tenant," I said, "and your lease is up." The detective grabbed her wrists. She didn't fight. She went limp, her silver dress crumpling. As they led her away, she didn't look at the police. She looked at Leo. "I made you," she hissed. Leo looked her in the eye. "No. You tried to break me, but my father built me with better steel than you thought." They dragged her out. The heavy double doors swung shut behind them. The room was empty now, save for the debris of the party. Broken glass, overturned chairs, the smell of spilled wine and fear. The wind howled outside, shaking the glass walls. I felt a sudden exhaustion wash over me. The adrenaline was fading, leaving my knees weak. I leaned against the podium for support. Leo walked over to me. He reached out and took the heavy binder from the table. He closed it. Then he took my arm. "Dad," he said. "Are you okay?" I looked at him. He was taller than me now. He was strong. The slump was gone from his shoulders. "I am fine, son," I said. "Just doing a final inspection." "Let's go," Leo said. "This place. It really is going to fall, isn't it?" "Not tonight," I said. "It will stand for a while. The legal battle will keep it up longer than the concrete. But as a home, as a legacy, yes. It collapsed a long time ago." I picked up my briefcase. "One thing, Dad," Leo asked, as we walked toward the service elevator, stepping over the mess on the floor. "Why the service elevator?" "We own the building now. We could take the main one." I smiled, a tired, genuine smile. "Habit," I said. "Besides, the main elevator is for guests. We are the cleanup crew." We stepped into the freight elevator. The doors closed, shutting out the sight of the ruined gala. We began the long descent down to the street, leaving the ivory tower behind us, heading back down to the solid ground where we belonged. The detective did not shout. He did not need to. In a room where the air had been sucked out by the sudden vacuum of power, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. He held a laminated card in one hand and Victoria's wrists in the other. The clicking sound of the handcuffs ratcheting tight was louder than the storm raging outside the glass. It was a mechanical final sound, the sound of a steel door slamming shut. "Victoria Vance," the detective read, his tone bored and professional, as if he were reading a grocery list rather than ending a dynasty. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit commercial fraud, falsification of federal safety records, reckless endangerment in the first degree, and grand larceny. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Victoria did not remain silent. She was thrashing, her silver heels scraping against the floor she had claimed was perfect just minutes ago. Her hair, usually a helmet of hairspray and control, was coming loose in wild strands. "This is entrapment," she screamed, spitting the words at the officer's chest. "That man planted evidence. My building is safe. Get your hands off me. Do you know who I am? I am the woman who built this skyline." "You are the woman who built a death trap," the detective said, tightening his grip on her arm. "Let's go." As they began to drag her toward the freight elevator, the only exit available, now that the main lifts had been locked down by the fire marshal, a figure burst from the stairwell door. It was Sarah. She had run halfway down, seen the mass exodus, and realized that her life raft was sinking. She had come back up not to save her mother, but to save herself. Her mascara was running in black streaks down her cheeks. She saw Victoria in cuffs, and for a split second a look of pure calculation flashed across her face. Then she saw Leo. She changed direction instantly. She ran toward him, throwing herself at his chest. She grabbed the lapels of his cheap waiter's jacket, her fingers digging into the fabric. "Leo, baby, please," she sobbed, her voice pitched high and desperate. "You have to tell them. You have to stop this, Mom. She is crazy, we know that. But she just wanted what was best for the company, for us, for our future." Leo stood like a statue. He did not push her away, but he did not hold her. His arms hung at his sides. He looked down at his wife, and for the first time since I had known him, there was no adoration in his eyes. There was no fear. There was only a profound clinical detachment. He was looking at her the way a doctor looks at a tumor he has just decided to cut out. "There is no us, Sarah," Leo said. His voice was steady, devoid of the stammer that used to plague him when she was near. "There is just you, and there is me." "Don't say that," Sarah cried, shaking him. "We are married, we are a team. If she goes down, the assets get frozen. We lose the house. We lose the cars. You have to tell them it was a mistake. You signed the papers, Leo. You are the project manager. If you take the fall, she can get you the best lawyers. She can fix it. But if she goes to jail, we have nothing." She was not asking for forgiveness. She was asking him to be the scapegoat one last time. She was asking him to jump on a grenade so she could keep her country club membership. Leo reached into the breast pocket of his jacket. Sarah's eyes followed his hand, perhaps expecting a handkerchief or a checkbook. Instead, he pulled out a slim black device. It looked like an expensive fountain pen. He held it up between them. A tiny red light was blinking on the cap. "I am not taking the fall, Sarah," Leo said. "I have been recording everything." Sarah froze. Her hands dropped from his jacket as if it were burning hot. "What?" she whispered. "Every conversation for the last 3 days," Leo said. "Every threat your mother made. Every time she told me about the fake bank accounts. And every time you sat there and told me to just do what Mom says. It is all here. And the backup files were automatically uploaded to a secure FBI server 30 minutes ago." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the noise of the police radios. "I spoke to the federal prosecutor this morning, Sarah. I signed a plea deal. I am a cooperating witness. I am protected. You and your mother, you are the defendants." Sarah stepped back, horror dawning on her face. It wasn't the horror of losing her husband. It was the horror of realizing the tool she had used for 3 years had suddenly become a weapon. You traitor," she hissed. "We gave you everything. We gave you a life." "You gave me a leash," Leo corrected her. "And I just cut it." Across the room, Victoria saw the pen. She saw the interaction. She realized the game was not just lost, it was rigged. The realization that the idiot, son-in-law, had outmaneuvered her snapped the last thread of her sanity. "Leo!" Victoria shrieked, struggling so hard, the detective nearly lost his footing. "I will kill you! You ungrateful little rat, I picked you out of the gutter, I will bury you! You are nothing without me, nothing." The detective shoved her forward, forcing her toward the elevator. As she passed me, I stepped into her path. She stopped. She looked up at me, her eyes wild, her chest heaving. She looked at the old windbreaker, the cheap haircut, the man she had dismissed as a nobody less than an hour ago. "You think you won," she spat at me. "You think this matters? I have lawyers who will tie this up for decades. I will be out on bail by breakfast." I looked at her. I did not smile. This was not a moment for gloating. This was business. "You might make bail," I said calmly. "But you will never build again. I sent the structural report to every insurance carrier in North America an hour ago. You are uninsurable, Victoria. You are radioactive." She stared at me, hatred burning in her eyes. "And one more thing," I added, leaning in slightly so only she could hear. "You laughed when you made my son scrub your floors. You thought it was funny to see a man on his knees." I gestured toward the elevator, toward the waiting police car downstairs, toward the future that awaited her. "I inspected the federal detention center in Bastrop back in 1998, I told her. "The concrete floors in the cell blocks are very solid. High-density aggregate, no cracks. But they do get dirty. You will have plenty of time to scrub them, 10 to 20 years by my estimate." Her mouth opened to scream again, but no sound came out. The reality of it, the cold, gray concrete reality, finally hit her. She slumped in the detective's grip, her legs giving out. They didn't walk her into the elevator, they practically carried her. The doors slid shut, cutting off her wailing. The room was suddenly quiet. The storm outside seemed to have paused, as if acknowledging the shift in pressure. But the silence inside the building was matched by the noise outside. My phone, which I had kept on silent in my pocket, began to vibrate. It was a relentless, continuous buzz. I pulled it out. Notifications were scrolling down the screen, faster than I could read them. Vanguard Holdings. Stock plummets, 90% in after-hours trading. SEC. Announces emergency halt on Vanguard securities. Breaking Zenith Tower. Evacuated following structural whistleblower report. Major partners announce withdrawal from Vanguard projects. The collapse had begun. It wasn't a physical toppling of beams and girders. It was a progressive collapse of capital and reputation. Just like in a building, when the primary load-bearing element fails, in this case credibility, the rest of the structure cannot hold its own weight. The bank that held the loans would call them in tomorrow. The suppliers who hadn't been paid would file liens. The tenants who had signed leases would void their contracts. Victoria Vance's empire was dissolving into a cloud of digital dust. The remaining police officers began taping off the room with yellow crime scene tape. It was ironic. The tape looked exactly like the safety tape used on construction sites, the kind meant to keep people away from open pits. "Mr. Johnson," the lead officer said to me, "we need to clear the building. We are sealing it until the forensic engineering teams can arrive." "Of course," I said. "We are leaving." I turned to Leo. He was standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. He looked exhausted, but he was standing tall. He had taken off the white waiter's jacket and folded it neatly over the back of a chair. He was in his undershirt and black trousers. He looked more like a worker now, more like me. "Ready to go?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah. I have nothing to pack. Everything in that office, it wasn't mine anyway." We walked toward the service elevator. We did not speak on the way down. The descent took a long time. The elevator rattled and groaned sounds I had heard 1,000 times before, but now sounded like a death rattle for the building. When the doors opened on the ground floor, the scene was chaos. The lobby was filled with flashing red and blue lights. SWAT teams were guarding the entrances. But beyond the glass doors, the real mob was waiting. Hundreds of reporters, cameramen, and curious onlookers had gathered. The news of the billionaire bust had spread instantly. They were pressed against the glass like fish in an aquarium, hungry for a glimpse of the drama. "There is a back exit," Leo said. "Through the kitchen. We can avoid them." I shook my head. "No, we do not sneak out. We did nothing wrong. We walk out the front door." Leo looked at me. Then he smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. "Okay, front door." I pushed open the heavy glass doors. The noise hit us like a physical wave. Shouting. Camera shutters clicking like a swarm of cicadas. Flashbulbs popping in blinding white bursts. "Mr. Johnson, is it true you bought the debt?" Leo. "Did you know about the fraud? Are you going to testify against your wife? How much is the building really worth?" Microphones were thrust in our faces. People were jostling to get a shot of the janitor tycoon and the whistleblower son. I did not stop. I did not smile. I did not answer. I kept my eyes fixed on the street lamp across the parking lot. I used my shoulder to clear a path, moving with the unstoppable momentum of a bulldozer. Leo walked right beside me, matching my stride. We ignored the questions. We ignored the fame. We ignored the flashing lights that tried to turn our tragedy into entertainment. We reached my truck. It was sitting there, covered in dust, looking ancient and ugly amidst the chaos. It was the only honest thing in a 10-mile radius. I unlocked the doors. Leo climbed into the passenger seat. I got in behind the wheel. The interior smelled of old coffee and sawdust. It smelled like home. I started the engine. The V8 roared to life, a deep, throaty rumble that drowned out the shouting reporters. I put it in gear and pulled out of the parking spot. As we drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. The zenith rose into the night sky, lit up by police floodlights. It looked beautiful from a distance, but I knew the truth. It was dead. It was a tombstone for greed. And as the distance grew, the flashing lights faded into the darkness, leaving us alone on the road, heading toward a future that might be uncertain, but at least was built on solid ground. "Dad?" Leo asked quietly, staring out the window. "Yeah, son." Where are we going? To get a burger, I said. And then we are going to get you some work boots. You are going to need them. 2 months. That is how long it takes for concrete to reach its full compressive strength. In the trade, we call it the curing process. It starts as a liquid messy and vulnerable, taking the shape of whatever contains it. But give it time. Give it the right mixture of heat and pressure and it becomes stone. It becomes something that can hold up the world. I sat on a stack of untreated lumber, watching my son work. We were miles away from the glass and steel canyons of downtown San Antonio. We were in the West Side, a neighborhood of chain-link fences, and peeling paint where the wind smelled of dust and grilled onions instead of money. Leo was standing in a shallow trench, holding a trowel. He was not wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing a pair of Carhartt work pants that were stiff with dried mud, and a gray t-shirt that was soaked through with sweat. His face was smeared with mortar dust. He had lost 10 pounds of soft corporate bloat and gained 5 pounds of lean muscle. He looked tired. He looked dirty. And he looked happier than I had seen him in 10 years. I took a sip of black coffee from a thermos. It was bitter and hot just the way I like it. "Hey," I called out. "You are mixing that batch too wet. It will shrink when it dries." Leo looked up, shielding his eyes from the midday sun. He grinned. It was a real grin, not the polite, terrified grimace he used to wear at Vanguard galas. "I adjusted the ratio for the humidity, Dad," he called back. "Trust the architect." "I trust the architect," I grunted. "I just do not trust the weather." It had been a quiet 60 days, but busy. The fallout from the Zenith collapse had been spectacular. It was all over the news for weeks. Victoria Vance was denied bail. A judge ruled she was a flight risk, given her offshore accounts. She was sitting in a county jail cell awaiting trial. The Vanguard stock was delisted. The Zenith Tower itself was wrapped in safety netting, a dark monument to corruption, awaiting a federal decision on whether to reinforce it or tear it down. As for me, I didn't hold on to the debt. I didn't want to own a skyscraper. I wanted my life back. 2 weeks after the arrest, I sold the senior debt note to a rival development firm from Dallas. They bought it for 120 cents on the dollar, eager to acquire the prime downtown real estate. I paid off the mortgage on my house. I put my retirement savings back in the bank, plus a healthy profit. And I gave the rest to Leo. He didn't buy a Porsche. He bought this lot, an overgrown half-acre that used to be a dumping ground for old tires. The West Side Community Center, he had told me, showing me the blueprints on my kitchen table. A place for after-school programs. A safe place. Solid. Built right. Now we were building it. Just the two of us and a small crew of day laborers Leo had hired. I stood up and walked over to the trench. I watched him lay a cinder block, checking the level with obsessive care. "You know," I said, kicking a loose stone with my boot. "I spent your whole life teaching you about tensile strength and load distribution. I taught you how to read a blueprint. I taught you how to spot a hairline fracture in a beam." Leo tapped the block into place. "Yeah, you did." "I missed a chapter, though," I said. I looked down at my hands. "I forgot to teach you how to read people. I forgot to teach you that some people are just like that bad concrete, pretty on the surface, but full of air pockets underneath." Leo stopped working. He set the trowel down on the edge of the trench. He wiped his forehead with the back of his glove. "You didn't miss anything, Dad," he said quietly. "You taught me exactly what I needed. You taught me that if the foundation is bad, nothing else matters. I got distracted by the facade. I thought if I painted it nice enough, the cracks wouldn't show." He looked at the half-finished wall. "I learned the lesson," he said. "Structure is more important than paint. Integrity is more important than the view." I nodded. It was a good answer. It was a man's answer. "Coffee break is over," I said, trying to hide the swell of pride in my chest. "That mortar is going to set if you keep philosophizing." We worked in silence for another hour, the rhythmic scrape-tap-scrape of masonry filling the air. It was peaceful. Then the sound of an engine broke the rhythm. It was not the rattle of a work truck. It was the purr of a high-performance engine. I looked up. A black Range Rover pulled up to the curb. It was dusty, and I noticed a scrape on the front bumper that hadn't been fixed, a sign that money was tight. The driver's door opened. Sarah stepped out. She looked like a ghost of the woman I had seen at the gala. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a designer tracksuit, but she looked thin. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She walked across the dirt lot, her expensive sneakers sinking into the soft earth. I stiffened. I reached for my hammer purely out of instinct, then let my hand drop. This was not my fight. Leo saw her. He didn't drop his tool. He didn't look scared. He just sighed a short exhale of air and stood up straight in the trench. Sarah stopped 10 feet away. She looked at the construction site, then at me, and finally at Leo. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were puffy. "Leo," she said. Her voice was raspy. "Sarah," Leo said. He didn't climb out of the trench. He stayed where he was separated from her by a wall of cinder blocks. "I have been looking for you," she said. "I went to your dad's house. The neighbors said you were here." "I am working," Leo said. "What do you want?" "I want to talk," she said. She took a step closer, navigating around a pile of rebar. "Leo, it is a mess. The lawyers, they are freezing everything. They took the penthouse. They took the accounts. They are even coming for this car on Tuesday." "That sounds like a legal problem," Leo said calmly. "I suggest you call a public defender. I hear they are very hardworking." Sarah flinched. "Don't be cruel. I am your wife." "Ex-wife," Leo corrected her. "The papers were signed last week. You didn't contest them. You were too busy trying to hide your jewelry from the IRS." "I was scared," Sarah cried. The tears started, but I watched closely. They were not tears of remorse. They were tears of self-pity. "Leo, you know how my mother is. She controlled everything. I didn't have a choice. I was a victim too." "No," Leo said. "You were a beneficiary. There is a difference." "Please," she begged, extending a hand toward him. "I have nowhere to go. My friends, they won't answer my calls. The credit cards are declined. I am sleeping at a motel on the interstate. Leo, we had something. We can start over. You are building this place. We can build it together. I can help. I can do the interior design." I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Interior design. She wanted to pick out curtains while standing in the wreckage of her life. Leo looked at her hand. For a second I wondered if the old Leo, the soft, eager-to-please boy, would resurface. I wondered if he would reach out and pull her out of the mud. He looked down at his own hand. It was covered in gray mortar. It was rough. "Sarah," Leo said. His voice was not angry. It was just final. "Do you see this wall?" He pointed to the row of blocks he had just laid. "If I lay one bad block at the bottom," he said, "just one cracked hollow block, do you know what happens when I get to the roof?" Sarah stared at him confused. "What, Leo? I am talking about us." "The wall falls down," Leo said. "It might take a week or a year, but it falls. You cannot build a life on a bad foundation. And you and I, we were built on lies. We were built on your mother's money and my silence." "I can change," Sarah sobbed. "I can change, Leo, I promise." "People don't change their structural composition, Sarah," Leo said. "Concrete is concrete. Glass is glass. You are who you are. You stood there and watched me scrub a floor. You didn't help. You didn't speak up. You were embarrassed because the help was intrusive." He picked up his trowel. "Our structure failed," he said. "It failed from the footer up. It is condemned. There is no renovation. There is only demolition." "Leo, please!" she shrieked, her voice rising to that familiar Vance pitch. "You owe me. I made you a partner. I gave you status." "You gave me an ulcer," Leo said. Now, please move. You are standing in my mix pile." He turned his back on her. He dipped the trowel into the bucket of mortar, slapped a dollop of gray mud onto the block, and scraped it smooth. Scrape, tap, scrape. He went back to work. Sarah stood there for a long minute. She looked at his back. She looked at me. I was sitting on my crate, sipping my coffee, watching her, with the impassive gaze of a gargoyle. She realized then that there was no audience here. There was no leverage. She put her sunglasses back on to hide her eyes. She turned around and walked back to the Rover. She dragged her feet. The car door slammed. The engine roared, angry and impotent, and she sped away, kicking up a cloud of dust that settled over the site. Leo didn't look up. He didn't watch her go. He just kept laying bricks. I waited until the sound of the car had faded completely. "You okay?" I asked. Leo set the block. He checked the level. The bubble was dead center. Perfect alignment. "I am fine," he said. "Actually, I am better than fine." He looked at me. "I used to think that losing her would destroy me," he said. "I thought she was the support beam of my life. But she wasn't." He tapped his chest. "I am the support beam," he said. I smiled. I stood up and stretched my back. My joints popped a familiar symphony of age and labor. "Well, Mr. Support Beam," I said, "this wall is not going to build itself. Toss me that bag of cement." Leo laughed. He grabbed a 50-pound bag of Portland cement and tossed it to me like it was a pillow. I caught it, feeling the heavy, solid weight of it in my arms. We went back to work. The sun was hot, the work was hard, and my bank account was smaller than it had been a week ago. But as I watched my son build a wall that was straight and true and honest, I knew I was the richest man in Texas. The cracks were gone. The foundation was set. And this time we were building something that would last forever. It has been 6 months since the night the glass shattered at the gala. I stood on the sidewalk across the street from the building formerly known as the Zenith. It has a new name now. The new owners, a sensible group from Chicago, renamed it the Meridian. They stripped the gold leaf off the columns. They removed the flashy, oversized logo from the lobby. Currently, the entire ground floor is encased in scaffolding. They are doing what should have been done in the beginning. They are injecting high-strength epoxy into the fissures. They are wrapping the support pillars in carbon fiber jackets to increase their load-bearing capacity. They are spending $40 million to fix a mistake that cost Victoria Vance her freedom. I looked at my reflection in the plate glass window of the coffee shop behind me. The man staring back was old. The lines on my face were deep, carved by 64 years of sun and stress. My hair was thinner than it used to be, and my shoulders were not as broad as they were when I was pouring slabs in the 80s. But the posture was straight. The eyes were clear. I looked like a building that had settled, yes, but one that was not going anywhere. We spend our lives teaching our children to be soft. We teach them to be kind, to be patient, to turn the other cheek. We tell them that if they work hard and keep their heads down, the world will treat them fairly. We build them with open floor plans and large windows designed to let the light in. But we forget to teach them about the wind. We forget to tell them that the world is also full of shear forces. It is full of people like Victoria Vance who view kindness not as a virtue, but as a structural weakness to be exploited. They see a soft heart and they think, I can drill into that. I can extract value from that. I thought about Leo. I thought about the boy I raised to be gentle. I raised him to be an architect of beauty, but I forgot to teach him the engineering of survival. I let him walk into a marriage with a woman who treated him like a load-bearing wall, something to carry her weight, while she added more and more pressure, never asking if he was close to buckling. Standing there watching the construction crew hoist a steel beam into place, I realized the most important lesson of this entire ordeal. It is a lesson about self-preservation. People often mistake self-preservation for selfishness. They think that putting yourself first is an act of vanity. They are wrong. Self-preservation is an act of responsibility. In structural engineering, we have a concept called redundancy. You never build a bridge with just one cable. You never build a roof with just one pillar. You build it so that if one part fails, the whole thing does not collapse. But you also maintain the integrity of the core. If the core fails, redundancy does not matter. You are the core of your own life. You are the pillar that holds up your children, your spouse, your dreams, and your future. If you allow someone to chip away at your concrete, to dilute your mixture with sand and lies, to over-leverage your emotional capacity, you are not being noble. You are being negligent. Because when you crumble, you do not just destroy yourself. You bring down everyone who was relying on you for shelter. Leo tried to be noble. He tried to make it work with Sarah and Victoria. He absorbed the stress. He took the compression. He thought that by scrubbing floors and swallowing insults, he was keeping the peace. But he was not keeping the peace. He was just delaying the failure. He was letting the rot spread until the building was uninhabitable. You cannot keep a house standing if the termites are eating the frame, no matter how much you love the house. Sometimes, the most moral thing you can do is condemn the structure and walk away. I checked my watch. It was 4 o'clock. I had a meeting with the city planner regarding the permits for the West Side Community Center. But I lingered for one more moment thinking about the woman who had built this tower of lies. Victoria Vance was currently residing in a federal correctional facility in Fort Worth. She was serving a sentence of 15 years. Her lawyers tried to argue for house arrest, citing her status and her health, but the judge was a man who had lost his own home in a hurricane due to poor construction. He did not have much sympathy for corner cutters. I heard through the grapevine lawyers talk, and so do guards, about her new life. She works in the laundry unit, 8 hours a day, sorting gray jumpsuits, loading industrial washers, folding sheets. There is a poetic symmetry to it that satisfies the mathematical part of my brain. Newton's third law states that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Victoria forced my son, a man of intellect and skill, to scrub a marble floor to humiliate him. She wanted to push his face into the dirt so he would know his place. Now, she spends her days scrubbing the stains out of other prisoners' clothes. The universe has a way of balancing the load. Gravity always wins eventually. I remember the moment I saw Leo on his knees in that bathroom. It broke my heart then. But looking back, I see it differently now. Sometimes, you have to be on your knees to see the truth. When you are standing tall, walking through the penthouse looking at the view, you miss the details. You do not see the hairline cracks in the baseboards. You do not see the uneven settling of the floor tiles. You are too distracted by the chandelier. But when you are down on the floor, when you have been knocked down by life or by people who claim to love you, your perspective changes. You see the dust. You see the dirt. You see the structural flaws that were hidden by the expensive rugs. Leo saw the flaws that night. He saw that the family he married into was not just mean, they were hollow. He saw that his wife was not a partner, she was a parasite. It took the humiliation of scrubbing that floor for him to finally inspect the foundation of his own life. So if you are listening to this story and you feel like you are on your knees right now, if you feel like you are scrubbing a floor while someone else laughs, do not despair. Use that vantage point. Look closely at the people standing over you. Look at their shoes. Look at the cracks in their facade. And then stand up. Do not let the glamour of others blind you. We live in a world that is obsessed with the finish. We care about the paint color, the landscaping, the curb appeal. We date people because they look good on paper. We marry into families because they have money or status. We take jobs because the office has a nice view. We forget to check the foundation. Before you let someone into your life, inspect them. Not their bank account. Not their smile. Inspect their character. Apply pressure. See how they react to stress. Do they bend or do they break? Do they support you or do they lean on you until you snap? If you find a crack, do not paint over it. Do not ignore it. Do not think your love is strong enough to hold up a collapsing wall. Evacuate. It is not quitting. It is not failure. It is structural engineering. It is saving your life so you can build something better on solid ground. I turned away from the meridian. The sun was beginning to dip low in the Texas sky, casting long orange shadows across the pavement. I walked to my truck. It was parked in a loading zone, but the ticket on the windshield did not bother me. It was a small price to pay for closure. I climbed into the cab. The seat was worn molded to my shape over 2 decades of driving. It was comfortable. On the passenger seat lay a roll of blueprints. They were Leo's final drawings for the community center. We were pouring the slab next week. It was not a skyscraper. It was a single-story building with reinforced masonry walls and a steel truss roof. It was designed to withstand hurricane-force winds. It was designed to be a shelter for kids who had nowhere else to go. It was not designed to impress anyone. It was designed to serve. I reached over and touched the paper. It felt real. It felt permanent. My son was safe. He was free. He was building again. And most importantly, he was smiling again. I started the engine. The old Ford grumbled to life, a steady, reliable rhythm. I put it in gear and pulled out into the traffic. I did not look back at the tower. I did not need to. I knew it would stand, and I knew it would eventually fall, because everything man-made eventually falls. But the truth stands forever. I drove toward the west, toward the setting sun that was painting the clouds in shades of purple and gold. I was 64 years old. My bank account was smaller than it had been, but my conscience was clean. I had done my job. I had inspected the damage, I had reinforced the structure, and I had cleared the debris. Now it was time to rest. The screen fades to black. Clang. The sound of a heavy hammer striking a solid steel beam rings out once, echoing into the silence. A sound of strength. A sound of rebuilding. Thank you so much for listening to this story of justice and redemption. I want to know where you are tuning in from right now. Are you listening from your car, your workplace, or maybe from the comfort of your own home? Drop a comment below with your location and let me know what time it is there. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And please, if you believe in the importance of standing up for yourself, do me a favor and hit that like button, subscribe to the Bittersweet Revenge channel, and press the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it. Your support helps us build a community that values truth over appearances. Stay strong and always check your foundation.